I couldn't agree with you more. The 12 steps are always a worthy endeavor.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of preconceived notions about what it is from because of the 12-step policy, right? That they're not promoting it. So what ends up being promoted oftentimes is the idea that, from people who have tried it and it didn't work for them for a variety of reasons. And so they're upset about it. So that's what gets talked about in social media, or there's a lot of but like movies and things like that portraying people in 12 step that I don't feel is necessarily accurate.
I'm Flindt Andersen, founder of Pain, Parents and Addicts in Need. I've been in recovery since 2001, and there isn't much I don't know about recovery. And my mission is to constantly tell the truth about addiction, to make the realities of addiction, recovery, and drug culture known, and to drive awareness and advocate change that ultimately saves lives.
And I'm LaChance, a certified recovery coach with a passion for speaking with others and sharing their knowledge to help others seek recovery and maintain long-term sobriety. And this is the Don't Hide the Scars podcast, presented by Pain, Parents and Addicts in Need.
Arlina Allen, thank you for joining the founder of Pain, Flindt Andersen, and myself, LaChance, on Don't Hide the Scars.
Thanks so much for having me back again.
Again and again. This is like 4 or 5 times a year. I love it.
I know. I keep inviting myself on, but this time I have a really good reason.
They're always good reasons.
But you don't even need a good reason, Arlina.
I love you guys.
Just call and say, hey, because we'll shoot the shit. I mean,
That's fun.
Well, I mean, you fit all of our criteria, parents and addicts in need. So, you covered all the bases. You've been through it all. So, hey, come on, you're brilliant. But today we're going to be discussing your book. It's out, The 12-Step Guide for Skeptics, Cleaning Up Common Misconceptions of a Path to Sobriety. I think this was needed. I've started in. Thank you for sending me a copy. And, it's awesome you got the permission from AA to do this and use everything.
Wow, that was intense. It took me a year to get permission.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why again, why that long? Is it just the fact that they're just slow, or what?
I have no idea, but it was like 3 days shy of the anniversary from when I initially submitted it. I would check in with them and they'd be like, "Thank you for your patience. We'll get back to you as soon as possible." And then like several months would go by and I'd be like, "What about now?" Yes, we'll get back to you.
It's like working with the state or something. I mean,
yeah.
It doesn't seem like any of these people actually work.
Yeah, I wonder if there's just this poor one guy who's dealing with all the inquiries. I really don't know. I try to give the benefit of the doubt, but all in God's timing, right?
Absolutely.
Yep, you bet.
Absolutely. Well, I like I was telling you, I've started digging into the book. I think it needed to be done. And I'm glad that you started with, you broke it up into 5 parts, but you started with an overview because, if people haven't caught prior episodes and conversations we've had here on the podcast with you, I couldn't agree with you more. The 12 steps are always a worthy endeavor for anyone in recovery. May not be your path, and you even speak about that in the book, but it's a worthy endeavor to dig into.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of preconceived notions about what it is because of the 12-step policy, right? That they're not promoting it. So what ends up being promoted oftentimes is the idea that, from people who have tried it and it didn't work for them for a variety of reasons. And so they're upset about it. So that's what gets talked about in social media, or there's a lot of like movies and things like that portraying people in 12 step that I don't feel is necessarily accurate. And so it leads to all these preconceived ideas. So people think that they know what it is and they dismiss it. And I'm like, hey, maybe we should talk about this. Maybe we should talk about what some of the preconceived notions are, like what are the ideas that keep people away from it to begin with. And then let's talk about how to navigate it in a safe way. Because, truth be told, it's, people go to meetings and not everybody at meetings are safe. So there needs to be some general guidelines about how to think about the process in general and some of the people.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you to jump in real quick here for a second. Explain to me what you mean by navigate in a safe way, because that word safe now is like, to me,
A little too ambiguous.
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say it's ridiculous, but some
Oh,
of it is, like, really. That's all I want to say. Really.
Overused? What?
Well, yeah, overused. Everybody's so sensitive. Everybody's this. Everybody's that. Okay, navigate in a safe way. I mean, just
yeah, what
explain
the
your
heck is
side of
that?
that.
Yeah, so when I first got sober, I was 25 and platinum blonde and super thin and listen, there was a lot of predatory behavior going
Yeah.
on.
Oh, sure.
And so the women would pull me aside and be like, "Hey, you don't have to hug that guy if you don't want to." Like, "Oh, by the way, if that guy invites you out to coffee, you're a newcomer. That's totally inappropriate."
Right.
Stuff like so for me it was
Okay,
like for me it was personal safety
that makes sense.
because there are people in at meetings. First of all, I want to say that the program and meetings are two separate things. The program is the steps, right? So that's kind of one of the first misconceptions I want to clear. People go to meetings, they never work a step. They have a bad experience with somebody at the meeting who, P.S., might be struggling with some mental illness
Sure.
issues, as we all do. And they discard the entire program, not understanding some of the nuances of it.
Yes.
And so if they don't understand that, they might reject the whole thing, throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and miss the whole magical experience that we all know and love.
Yeah.
Perfectly
Well, and
said.
I don't remember if we had talked about this, but I know I've mentioned on here. I went to out of town, like a retreat with some guys in AA down in San Diego. So I go to a meeting. It's a mixed meeting, and there's two cute young ladies there. They're maybe a week, and there's a guy, and I go up to them in the break, and I go, "Hey, just to let you know, that guy's going to come up to you. Just it just so you know." And I would recommend that you just, "Hi, nice to meet you," and leave it at that. And at the end,
Yeah.
they did it's a beeline right to him, and they looked at me and went, "How the fuck did you know?" And I went,
Yeah.
"Because I can spot him. Because
Right.
I can spot him."
Yeah, that's why there's women's meetings because a lot of women just feel safer. And
Yeah.
truth be told, my husband, he was a men's meeting guy because he didn't want the distraction of
Yeah.
women. There was and for him, I think it would be fair to say that they felt safer being more honest and they weren't trying to look good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, so it's kind of personal safety, but I understand what you mean. I don't mean like, like you're a unique snowflake and you need to be coddled or anything like that.
Correct.
There's a fair amount of that too. Which, some of the words, like one of the biggest obstacles, barriers to entry, people get tripped up over the words like God, powerlessness, alcoholic. And so I wanted to sort of offer some additional context to those words because it's not it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
Do you know one of the first things, though, that I would suggest to women, but it obviously would be better coming from a woman, would be when a woman is in early recovery. And Jason knows I have kind of an issue with this anyway. Whether it's men or women, when you're posting your recovery, that you're a week clean and sober and you're now 10 days and 12 days and better, I am a firm believer that that should not even happen. I just kind of take issue with all that stuff too soon.
Well, listen, I've been sober for 30 years, but the only thing that I know for sure is I don't know what's right for anyone else.
Yeah.
Mm.
Right? I'm not about trying to tell people how to dress or what they should
Sure.
post or so I don't know about any of that. The idea of women should dress a certain way, otherwise they're inviting certain things. I mean, that's a whole other discussion about
Mm-hmm.
men
Something
need
to
to be
think about.
appropriate. Men need to be appropriate.
Yeah.
It
Of
doesn't
course.
matter.
Of course.
There's actually a museum. This is kind of off topic, but there's a museum that's about what she wore. And there's little girl pajamas, there's sweats and hoodies. So it's not about what she's wearing. It's, maybe men should be responsible for their behavior.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And well, and I get kind of what you're
And
saying is that it was some of those things, like you mentioned, the groups. I'm like your husband. I prefer
Yep.
going to a men's group. I just feel like I can be more vulnerable. And I've heard women say
yeah,
the same thing. And especially if maybe part of their addiction started from any sort of, abuse of whatever kind. But yeah, it comes down to like a personal responsibility thing. And some people that are new don't have any. They don't have any discernment. And that's kind of what the goal is, to help build that discernment. But you brought up some of those great things that people struggle with, like the God part. That's the thing I hear all the time. I don't know how many people I've had to reach out. Well, I'm not religious. And I go, I'm
yeah,
not
that's a
either.
big one.
But you talk about God. Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
not religious. What do you mean? So
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard for people to get their heads wrapped around the idea that religion and spirituality can be separate things.
New Perceptions North, the premier drug and alcohol treatment and recovery center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised, top quality care with programs for detox and patient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living support groups, and more. New Perceptions North provides adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect, in a safe, comfortable environment to begin the process of recovery, to proudly create and sustain a life without addiction. Call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
I would say that if you have a problem with the word God, you probably have a problem with somebody else's God, right? Like listen, when I got sober 30 years ago, there wasn't anything else. But I was so desperate to be sober. I was like, fine, I'll go. And they were talking about God, and I was terrified because I was like, if this is going to be religious, I'm not going to be able to do it. But I had this gal I was chatting with, and she ended up being my sponsor. But my step one exercise, she said, or maybe it was step two, but it was list all the things you wish God was and all the things that you hope he's not. Right. And so I listed things like, well, all loving, forgiving, powerful, create, like I just listed all the loves me, like I'm the favorite. Like I just listed all these things, right? And then it was like, okay, the list of what I hope it's not, like condemning and judgmental and just all these negative things. And when I was done with my list, she was like, let me see it. And I handed it to her. It was such a visceral, she tore it in half and gave me the good side. She's like, we're going to start with this. It needs to be, she was like, it needs to be something that makes sense to you. And I was like, okay, this whole idea of God is love, that makes sense to me because I am a skeptic myself, right? Like I was very skeptical and I was like, oh, this God thing. But anyway, that's where we started. And the whole point is to start somewhere with something that makes sense to you. And then the concept itself will grow and evolve and change over time. And I would say, I still can't necessarily put my finger on it. But I do know that it is rooted, it's still love for me. It's still like the energy of love. And there is magic in the sense that when I'm in this mode of surrender or acceptance or open-mindedness, like things beyond my control or imagination tend to unfold and blossom. Like my mind says, oh, the outcome's going to be this or that. But then when I pray to God and stay open, there's all these other alternatives that end up manifesting that if I just give it a little time and patience, like something like all these other miraculous things tend to happen.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I get why that's such a struggle for anyone newcomer. I mean, we're continually looking for an outside solution to our inside problems. And so that idea that there's any connection to something greater and it starts within us
On the inside.
on the inside is a huge struggle because we've been avoiding it. We've been avoiding the inside to the best of our ability. And insanity, really. And so I
Yeah.
think that is a big struggle for people to really try to take a look at that as any kind of a foundation to flow from within. But how do you maybe help anyone, or does the book lay out helping someone with that concept of that it's like it gets to be personal, almost playing to their ego a little bit, like this is totally about you.
Yeah. I mean, we have to kind of meet people where they're at, right? So if there's fear and it's like I don't get like how this thing outside of me is gonna fix me. And I do kind of explain it kind of just the way I did, but I think another something important to note is you'll hear, especially at meetings and things, about what God's will is. And I think people are afraid that if you're a creative person, God's going to want you to be an accountant or something.
Right.
But for me, sobriety has been about learning, and the process of the steps actually has helped me to learn about myself and get reconnected with sort of my inner intuition. And for me, that's where God lives. That's how I am following what God's will is for me, is like being in touch with what feels right, like what has heart and meaning. That's kind of my inner compass. Like that's how I know what God's will is. But it was important for somebody to be like, hey, let's start with what makes sense to you, and it'll grow from there.
You said something earlier when we were just starting about in God's time, and I think, well, let me tell you, time is not everybody's friend. And a lot of people kind of expect this, that God's just going to automatically make everything better in a short amount of time. And in my experience, that's not how he works. And we have to be diligent enough and to if we have that faith, to put that trust there. Okay, knowing that at some point, yeah, God is going to make that change, but there are steps to making a change, and it does not come overnight, and people don't like to wait.
Yeah. What's so interesting is that there were certain things that did happen quickly,
Mm.
and there were things that happened slowly,
Mm-hmm.
and both were appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And there's this, you mentioned having faith. Well, to be perfectly honest, I didn't have any.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed evidence. And what's so great about like going to meetings and things like that, like meetings have there's some challenges there that we can talk about. But it was just interesting that I saw evidence. Like I witnessed people changing.
Mm-hmm.
I would change sometimes from the time I set foot in a meeting to the time I left, I was different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I found that the help came in the way that it needed to, when it needed. Like sometimes I would go to meetings so twisted up and I didn't hear necessarily exactly what I needed in the meeting, but there was somebody that was willing to talk to me
Mm-hmm.
afterwards. And so there's like, maybe the huge sweeping things don't change overnight, but moment to moment, we can have access to relief.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I did need evidence. Like I was a skeptic. I needed evidence. And so yeah. It's funny, the timing thing. It's like sometimes we want real instant relief now, but you're right. Action is required.
Sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, in fact, I had this conversation on Friday at an event I was speaking at. And a lot of times and I'll just say me, I didn't recognize who God was putting in my path.
Yeah.
And that was God going, hey, dude, okay, I got this person right here. Okay, he's going to help you with this particular situation, right?
Yeah.
It's that old religious joke, something about there comes a flood, and the helicopter comes over, right, and you turn it away, and then God finally says, well, you drowned, you idiot. Okay, but I sent you a boat, a helicopter,
Yeah.
and now you're with me,
And we just don't recognize it. I think that's one of the gifts of the program, is that we start to recognize that the people around us, either we're in service to them, it's an opportunity to be of service to somebody else, or they're present, especially the challenging people, they're actually doing us a favor, because as I deal with challenging people, it brings up something in me that needs healing, right? Like I go to a meeting and somebody would say something that I was either offended by or somebody would do something and I'd take it to my sponsor and we'd have a discussion about it and I would learn something about myself that needed maybe some compassion or maybe I needed to offer compassion or forgiveness. Those seem to be reoccurring themes for
Mm-hmm.
healing. And so it was necessary and it was important. I didn't recognize it in the moment that they were, there to help me.
Right.
Sometimes God uses challenging people, but it's all happening for me, not to me. I love this analogy of a gemologist. A gemologist will take two rough amethysts, and put it in a tumbler, and the amethyst will bump off the rough edges, and they come out shiny, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like meetings are like that. Like God
Sure.
puts us in this tumbler of these people, and we all have these crazy character defects, and we're all, working on survival skills, and we kind of rub each other the wrong way sometimes. But if we apply the principles of the actual program to these interpersonal relationships, these experiences, we come out on the other side a little smoother
Yeah.
for having a new addition, like deeper compassion, and maybe we forgive ourselves, maybe we forgive others, and we're better for it.
Right.
Yeah, I found that many of the things that when you're talking about that pop up for me in that refinement is opportunities of reflection and correction, where maybe it's taking a look back at something in the way that I thought about a situation, scenario, person, place, and whatever it is, um, because of where I'm at now. That story that I had around it shifts, or I'm thinking I'm right in certain actions and somebody shares something. It's like, oh, you just gave me the perspective of the person on the other
On
side.
the other side.
Oh,
Yeah.
shit. And so we get to go back to that thing that normies don't get when we use the word, I'm trying to make an amends. Yeah. What the hell is that? Like an apology, and it's an apology that will follow with corrected behavior, and
Yeah.
Granville Home of Hope, here we go again. 2024, we're back. Granville Homes is building a brand new home. We're going to give it away on December 4th, 2024. You can get your ticket. It's $100, or you can get a bundle of tickets for $200, which includes the chance of winning a brand new Lexus for 2 years. And Payne will receive 100% of all the proceeds from the tickets that we sell, as well as the 8 other nonprofits that are involved with this event. So you can go to our website. You can find out there how you purchase the tickets. We can't sell the tickets online for legal reasons. But other than that, you can call our number. You can reach out to our office, and we'll show you how to get those. So help us out.
You know what I like about amends is I was taught that it is an apology, but it's also an acknowledgement of I can see how my behavior affected you in this very specific way. What can I do to make it right? And oh, by the way, if you need some time to think about this and get back to me, we need to give people a little space to have a feeling and process this, because I come to realize, I did all this processing, I'm writing, I'm praying, I'm doing all this stuff, and I muster up all my courage to present this thing to you. Meanwhile, they're just minding their own business and living their lives, and then they get confronted with this thing. We expect them to be able to respond without processing. That doesn't seem reasonable. So I also like to add that's like, and if you need to think about this and get back to me, you can. You don't need to come up with a response in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the other like common barriers, myths, misconceptions that you think it was really important to point out and that you included in the book?
So, words can be really triggering for some people. They brings up a lot of stuff. So the word God, alcoholic is another one. To me, it's a badge of honor, right?
Right.
I've adopted that identity. I'm very comfortable with it. I mean, 30 years ago, they weren't talking about anything else but that, right? They didn't call it alcohol use disorder. We didn't talk about, drinking as a survival skill. We didn't talk about any of that. And so at first it was like, oh my gosh, I have to adopt this this label. But then I had come to understand that that's a term that's used by people in a program who like you and the three of us understand that it takes so much courage to do the self-reflection, to submit to this process that is so, I don't know, offensive, is that the right word? But it's like so confronting to our ego, right? And so to me, when I hear that somebody is adopting this term alcoholic, I go, oh, that's a badge of honor because I understand the courage that's required to submit to this process. And it kind of it's like, oh, we get each other on a deeper level and on a multitude of facets that we really understand each other. And but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you want to use that word or not. Like I'm not hung up on needing to use that word. Like mental illness works, stuck in my survival skill. Listen, I don't care. I don't care how you want to identify yourself. At the end of the day, we're trying to adopt a sober identity. And what does that mean to you? Right? It's like, but let's recognize that there's a problem. Call it what you will, but that shouldn't be the barrier that keeps you out because there's a whole world that opens up after that particular word.
Right.
Yeah, people like to get stuck in the minutia sometimes or the dogma of things.
They're
And
scared.
yeah, and I totally get. And maybe for some, I mean, my thing, and Flindt knows this, is I got to kind of exhaust the hell out of something and then figure out what it is for me and how does it work and whatever it is. And sometimes the language of things don't matter as much as the action behind that. And for some people, they really do. And it's okay. Because in certain settings, I do. Like, my finances finally started to improve. I know that's because God was like, you're not ready yet. So I needed to have people that knew a hell of a lot more than me tell me exactly how to do it. This is the plan. Lay it out to me. With recovery, I just needed to primarily, for me, find a different type of community. I live in a small community. All of the people I associated with were drinkers. Not necessarily alcoholics. Some are. Some were or still are. I don't know. I don't talk to them anymore. Nothing wrong with them. So it was kind of a different thing. I just needed a different setting. I almost just needed a place where I could go hang out and talk with men, sometimes women, but that were just living a different way, that I can converse about different things. So for me, it was a little more open. Not that I didn't work the 12 steps, because I did multiple times and continue to, but I just needed something a little bit different. And I think some people, you got to kind of accept maybe you need to be told exactly what to do. And that's okay. And some people, not as much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why this whole thing about recovery can be confusing because everybody's sort of addressing this with a variety of different factors. Right. And, if you're coming in with a lot of guilt and shame, the word alcoholic might be just like too much to bear. But listen, I had no problem admitting I was an alcoholic. I was all, I had enough evidence. I was all, that's me. No qualms about it. And it just kind of makes me sad that people are like, oh, I can't do the 12 steps because I'm not going to admit I'm an alcoholic. And there'll be plenty of people at meetings who will insist you call yourself an alcoholic. But I think we're missing the point there.
Yeah. One of the things that at least affected me coming out of treatment, and we don't do this today in our treatment center. One of the things was, again, I had no problem admitting I was a drug addict. I mean, right. I mean, all you had to do is look at me. Right? Okay. And everybody goes, that's a drug addict.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Clear as day.
Right. But when I was sitting at the treatment center, and it was a very well-known treatment facility, they had Family Week. And I absolutely despise Family Week simply because you're there for 30 days at the most. And all of a sudden, in the middle of that, 2.5, 3 weeks into it, right? They fly the families in. And and the families literally confront you. They train. This is the Betty Ford Center, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah, Arlina. And by the way, still private treatment centers today do this, which again, ours do not. So I'm sitting there, just my story. So we're sitting there, and my wife and one of my sons came. The other one didn't want anything to do with me at that point, and that was perfectly okay. But I literally had to sit there. By the way, I was wrong, but I had to sit there and listen to them tell me everything that I did that was wrong without truly having even the most minute sense of how I was supposed to respond, when I was supposed to respond, how I was supposed to respond. And all it did was piss me off.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and that just blew up, to be honest with you, because they also put you in there with the rest of the inmates, right? And their families sitting around, and you have to confront your family members. So the point here is coming out of there and going in, and I did. I mean, I went from the airport to a meeting, right? And started that 90 and 90.
Mhm.
I didn't know what was up from down.
Yeah, you didn't know to shit or wine.
Shit or go blind, or wine go blind, right? I mean, that's it. So again, I think there's got to be, especially if somebody does go to a treatment facility, there has to be, maybe, for the lack of a better term, a gentler way to get somebody involved into going to meetings. And here's the correct way to do it, because when you look, we all know the guilt that we had over this. We know what we did was wrong, and the people we had harmed, and the things that we had said to people. But to all of a sudden just have that come back at a moment's notice, it was like, holy shit, I can't do this for the rest of my life, kind of a thing.
I need to ask my dad, because he went there too, and I know we went and visited, but I don't remember the confrontation.
It was a thing.
And I would think, kind of like you started with, you had part 4, that what Flindt shared could be one of the good reasons that people leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, 30 days is not enough time to introduce the family, I don't think. I mean,
It isn't.
I mean, there's so much, like, you're just like barely coming around. Like, the fog is barely lifting at 30 days. Like, the 30 days, it's like you're getting like a little bit of stability. Hopefully you're getting a lot of support to just deal with your internal feelings and to try to deal with everybody else's feelings. That seems very, very early to me.
Yep.
Like, I know it needs to be addressed, and I think it's appropriate to do family therapy, but 12 steps is not family therapy, right? I think they can run concurrent. Like, the 12 steps is a tool. I don't know about you guys, but I never did just one thing. Like, I did 12 step. I also did therapy. I studied something called the Course in Miracles. I was suddenly, like, my brain was so thirsty for, there's all this information out there. And so it's like this whole world opened up to me. So I used a multitude of tools. But to your point, to address the family within the first 30 days seems a little early. There's maybe some damage control that needs to happen, but it should be safe for everyone, right? Like, because I think you're right. It could do more harm than good.
Well, and here's just another little piece to that, again, because of this thing I was at Friday. That's why I'm so glad that you've written this book, because look, I'm talking to law enforcement, I'm talking to therapists and counselors and DEA and FBI, everybody, the community got together. And you've got these counselors out there. By the way, their hearts are in the right place. All right. They want to help. But this one gentleman is talking about, there's not enough beds out there for the addict. And, we just need to get them detoxed because in 72 hours, the detox is over, and now we can move them into a sober living or into, and then it was my turn to speak. And that was like, okay, buddy, you just lit a fire here. Okay. That I'm going to just extinguish. Okay. Because you just said it, it's not enough time. The 72 hours, number one, is nowhere close. But the point is, even people that are out there wanting to help, that are therapists, that are counselors, all right, they don't know what the addict and the alcoholic are going through. They have no clue. It's so cut and dry to them when it's not.
It's not so
right.
complicated.
And we know the treatment industry, again, is, I'm not going to get off on that today, but the treatment industry is damaged, right?
Yeah,
because it's get them in, get them out, get them in, get them out. And that's not the way this thing needs to go.
No, and listen, I wish I had known about treatment, but I didn't, and I got sober by going to meetings because it was somewhere for me to go.
Right.
It did feel safe, like I was getting it. I felt welcomed, and these people were speaking my language, and it was probably the first time in my life that I felt seen, heard, and understood.
Sure.
Without the shame of somebody that is not suffering the way I am, right?
Okay.
And so I think it's important to note that 12 step is peer support, right? So we're just, these sponsors and people there, they're giving of their own time. They're not necessarily professionals. I think it's important to have both if you can, right? But you absolutely can get sober by going to meetings every day. Sometimes I went to meetings twice a day just because I needed a safe place to be. Just because I was lonely. I needed some friends. I needed some friends who weren't, I had to get rid of all my old friends. Truth be told, I really didn't have any friends left because I kind of burned all my bridges. But there was like this whole fresh group of people that, I could go to. And by the way, there's all kinds of meetings, right? In the very beginning, I was terrified someone was going to ask me to share, but I found out that there were speaker meetings where I could just go and show up and somebody else would do all the talking and tell their story. And, I heard that hope was hearing other people's experience. That was definitely true for me. I would there were women's meetings, there were book literature meetings, like step study meetings. There were like same-sex meetings. There's like all kinds of I'm sorry, I always get it wrong.
LGBTQ plus.
Yes, thank you. I mean, listen, as they said, when I first got sober, they said that there was a wrench for every nut. So I definitely found my people there. And so so I didn't get to go to treatment, but I did go to tons of meetings and the net effect was the same.
Right. And again, to me, you said something very important right there, because this is my take on this. You get sober in AA and 12-step meetings. You get clean and off of the substance in treatment. And I am a firm believer, because look, you can literally die from alcohol withdrawal. You can die from benzodiazepine withdrawal. You're really not going to die from an opiate withdrawal, although you think you are and you want to and you pray for it. Okay. But you can still have a variety of maladies here. You could have a seizure. You can have stroke. The list is long. So like I always say, you get clean in treatment and you get sober in AA and 12-step meetings. To me, there's a difference between the two. A lot of people take the word sober and think that, you don't drink anymore. You don't use anymore. To me, sober is living that good, productive, non-judgmental, by the way, non-perfect life, because none of us are perfect, but it's striving to live that good life. That's what sober means to me, not the fact I just stopped drinking or using.
Yeah. It's it's such a process. I think people get so hung up on terminology, but at the end of the day, we're trying to heal, right? We're trying to clean up the wreckage of our past. We're trying to understand what our patterns are. That was the great thing about the 4-step for me, is that it was the first time I had awareness of what my patterns were. And then I would hear other people talking about their patterns and how they changed it. And then I understood, what the root cause of my patterns were. Like, where did these things come from to begin with, right? And so there is a lot going on, and especially in the beginning. And so it's nice to just really surround yourself with people who are in touch with like the solution, the professional therapists who are trauma informed and have access to processes like EMDR or IFS, internal family systems and stuff like that. But man, for me, I didn't have any money when I first got sober. So thank God there were these women there who were willing, and there were some men too, but these women, they had time to spend with me to help me sort out, like unpack all the baggage.
Sure.
And they did it through the steps.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's touch on some of the reasons that, and especially with the work that you do, that you've seen maybe people leave 12-step groups and sometimes never come back.
Sometimes I know that makes me really sad. I had a friend recently who, I met her in, other sober communities, recovery communities, and she shared this experience that she had with this sober group. She had a sponsor that had like 13, 14 other sponsees, and she had been sober probably by the time she left this group, she'd been about 15 years sober. But what had happened in that group was there was like this leader, and the leader thought she knew it was right for everybody. And she was telling, it was like a very control. And I'm sure you guys have seen this too, where somebody gets a lot of sponsees and then they think they know something and then can tell everybody how to live their lives or whatever. Well, they started studying other things. And once they started studying other things as a group, then they were no longer really 12-step oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in her mind, this was a 12-step group. And so when the group turned sour, it became like really cultish with this controlling leader. She just abandoned the whole thing. And she can't even hear the word, conceive of the idea of having a sponsor
Right.
or to be any of the language is, she's just so she was so hurt by this experience is what happened. She felt very hurt by this experience. And she was one of those who kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, and it was like never again. And it made me really sad because there are legions of people, there's other people, there's other meetings, there's other people. And we kind of did a 4-step around it. And what ended up coming up was this pattern of abandonment, self-abandonment. She had some childhood abandonment in her family of origin, and she just continued to repeat this pattern. The leader of her group was very much like her father, who was controlling and blah blah blah. And so she sort of, and this is what we do. It's like we have these patterns in childhood and we repeat them as adults. It makes sense, right? As you're growing up, your nervous system is being developed. And if you have a lot of traumatic experiences, your brain and body develop certain responses. We repurpose those same neural pathways in adulthood so that when we get into relationships, we're acting out these same patterns, right? But she was sober, but she was still acting out these patterns. And what we when we ended up in her part, it was she continued to show up in abusive relationships. She didn't speak her voice. Like she abdicated her power to somebody else, right? Was that the fault of the 12-step organization? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
That group had nothing to do with the organization, official position of the organization. That's not how it's intended to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what happens sometimes. But she was able to stay, got sober, got healthy, did therapy, did a bunch of other stuff, and she's fine. She's still sober.
Good.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting that you I don't know why I want to say this. Yeah, it presented to an opportunity again for that examination.
Right.
The what's the saying? Those things that which we do not deal with deals with us.
Yeah.
And so it's almost that inner thing, like you said, these patterns from when we were a child haven't yet dealt with it. Like all of a sudden, wow, I ended up in this same thing again. It's like, yeah, here's the beauty. It's your opportunity to deal with and confront it finally. And
With
I think
passion.
yes. And I think that's sometimes the thing for certain people too, that I've seen where they leave. I do mostly celebrate recovery now. That sometimes is like, I hadn't seen you in a while, and it's never, very few of us, it's ever like, yeah, I've just been incredibly busy. It's like, well, I just didn't feel like I was welcome. Like, why? Oh, it's a story that you were attached to. It's not that anybody did. I remember talking to this one guy, and he's primarily alcohol, and he's, well, my wife wanted me here and all that. I'm like, yeah, you didn't want to come back because you're feeling like it's pressure. Do you want to be here? Do you want this for your life? Like you are attaching this all to a story like it's some kind of burden and not an opportunity. Like, take a look at the opportunity. It's like, oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. I didn't think of it that way. It's like, yeah, this is like, because the alternative, remember what it was. It
Yeah.
wasn't good. Like, your wife was out the door and you misinterpreted her words. She said, if you don't do something to make change and show this family, I'm out of here. You took it as like, I was told I had to go do X, Y, and Z. No. Somebody set a boundary and you didn't like it. Why is that going on? Take a look at your life.
Yep.
What's the examination that you have to do?
It's so interesting because, I spent 10 years in doing tech sales. I'm from Silicon Valley, and I work for Fortune 500 tech companies. And what you learn in sales is that if you push somebody, it creates internal resistance automatically. Like if you held up your hand to Flynn and he put his hand and pushed, like you would automatically push back. Nobody told you to do it, but it's like it's such a visceral response that when you're pushed, you dig in your heels. It's putting somebody in a position to defend something that's not working. So pushing people is typically a bad idea. Sometimes we have to confront people with boundaries, but it's more like, I can no longer live this way. So you do what you want, but if this continues, I can't stay. Is really what's happening. And this whole, it's so funny. What's funny is that this book is probably the fifth or sixth draft, the one that I sent you. Because the first one, I was so mad because, there's so many misconceptions. And the lady was like, who are you trying to help here? Because you're so defensive. Like it sounds like you're trying to defend the program or push people into it. And I was like, oh, what's missing is compassion. Right. So the wife has to have compassion. We have to have compassion with ourselves. It sounded like you handled this person with compassion. It's like we have all these, we're so afraid and we're so like in our survival mode. It's like we're dealing with a lot of, like, we damage ourselves more than anybody else. Right.
Sure.
And so it's like, oh, my ego is preventing me from, like, I want to bail, right? Everything in my body says I need to leave. But it takes, if somebody's a compassionate voice that says, hey, but hold on a second. I can see you're afraid. It's like when you validate somebody's feelings, like they feel seen, heard, that's what engenders trust. It's not that you're going to coddle them. Like we are very good about pulling covers and confronting people, but it's so much more effective when it's done with compassion and empathy. It's like, dude, I see what you're doing. I did the same thing. And let me just tell you, you don't need to be afraid. You are safe here. When people feel safe, all their stuff naturally. I had a sponsor who made me feel so safe in her presence that all my stuff would just naturally bubble up, right? Like I was scared at first to read that fifth step. And then I started reading her a little bit and she'd go, oh yeah, me too. And guess what I did? And blah, blah, blah. Pretty soon I felt so safe that I was just like, blah, blah, blah. She couldn't shut me up.
Right.
Right. I told her all the things.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, compassion and empathy is such a huge piece of this whole process.
But again, brings it to just another point here. I believe that it is extremely critical when somebody is starting to go for the first time, whenever that moment is, all right, that you find that sponsor that's got, I've said it for years, that's got some time under their belt. Because if you're just looking for somebody that's got a year of sobriety, they are not going to have the knowledge and the experience and just what you were just talking about. It doesn't work that way because the brain, again, whether it's 6 months to a year, is still not completely fully functioning and back to normal again. And there is a lot to be said for the older person, male or female, it doesn't matter, who's in recovery, that has been there, actually been there before you. I just am a firm believer in that one. Because if not, you're going to get two 26-year-olds that are going to go out dancing on tables in about 2 weeks.
And I think that statement of finding somebody that has something that you want, again, we don't mean in a nefarious way,
correct,
is imperative. And hey, just in my own journey at even 2 years, I don't mean to put myself down because I came a long ways in 2 years, but I didn't have shit that anybody would want.
It's interesting. So I've had both. I've had sponsors that were didn't have a whole lot of time, and I've had sponsors. I tended to gravitate, especially later, towards women that were sort of motherly. Like I really craved like that motherly. But to be honest, when I first got sober, I was terrified of relapsing. I kept going to meetings. And they were talking about people doing steps 1, 2, and 3 and relapsing. That I was like, oh my God, I need to do this 4-step. Like I was so afraid I was going to relapse that I needed someone to hear my 4-step. Is kind of how it landed in my brain. And I had been listening to this gal who just had like this kindness about her, like this peace about her. And she remembered my name the second time she met me. And I know I was supposed to look for a sponsor. When she remembered my name the second time she met me, and I'd heard her speak many times, but it was like the clouds had parted and the sun was shining. I was like, oh, this is my sponsor. And I asked her if she would listen to my inventory, and she said, "You know what? I would be honored, but we're going to start with step 1." And do you know that this woman only had like 2 years sober, maybe? But 2 years felt like an eternity to me. Somebody who struggled for 60 days, right? And I actually write about Kimmers a lot in my book about how she walked me through the steps for the first time. But she was just the one that I needed at the time. I stayed with her for about a year. And then I did gravitate towards women that were sort of motherly, like older. But that I always was attracted to the woman that was going to be kind and compassionate because I felt so fragile. I felt like, when I first got sober, I don't know if you guys felt this way, but when I first got sober, I felt like a raw nerve ending. Like I had nothing to mask my pain. I felt everything like tenfold. And so I tended to gravitate towards women who spoke softly and were just super compassionate. So, again, like I don't know what's right for anybody else, but that's kind of how it went down for me. But the problem with people that are early in, so can I tell you, I was a terrible sponsor at first. I was terrible at it. Like I really wanted to be of service. Like I got through my steps and I tried to sponsor other women. I was terrible at it because I had so much stuff that was still unhealed that when I had like this rescuing thing in me. And so I wanted to rescue, and I was like desperate for them not to relapse, and I was taking inappropriate responsibility for other people. And so I was a hot mess, but it wasn't like God couldn't use me that way. Like maybe she needed a hot mess for a minute. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe that relationship served a purpose in a way that I don't really fully understand. That wasn't really my job. My job was to try to show up and be the best that I could be. But I did ultimately look for women that were in long-term healthy marriages, that were career oriented, that were mothers. And there is a recommendation that, that the women work with the women and the men work with the men. And I've come to understand for one of the reasons for that was the first time, when I sat with Kimmers, and my sponsor, and I shared my inventory with her, and I showed her the worst parts about me and she didn't flinch. Do you know what I'm saying? And I was like bonded to her. Like I loved her so much for loving and accepting me. I think if that had been a man, I think I would have been confused. I'm like, we're in love, right? We should probably have sex. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a reason like the men stick with the men and the women stick with them. All right, I guess if you're gay, you should probably go opposite sex. I don't know. But it should be somebody that you won't ultimately want to have sex because it's so confusing. That was the first time I was ever met with real intimacy. Into me, you see. And I knew that she got me. She got my kind of crazy, and I was so bonded to her till this day.
Right. Yeah. Right. I've only ever helped one woman that I could think as far as anything beyond connecting them with resources. And she went, why do I feel so safe with you? I said, because anything sexual and all of that intimate, like it's off the table. I'm just a person. If you want to sit and go, well, this man's helping, however you want to do it, whatever it is. But that boundary, I made that really clear to you when we started. Oh, yeah, you did. Like I can pick up your little looking for kind of like a validation, and I know how to skip right past that real fast. Like not gonna happen. Like I'm not there was never a compliment. Oh, your makeup looks nice. I like your dress or what. None of that.
Yeah.
Like you don't
Yeah.
have access to that.
Right.
So I think it takes that responsibility, and it's tough. But I'm like you, I recommend, hey, easiest, probably men work with men, women work with men, or depending upon your sexual orientation, gender identity, who knows? I've not had any conversations with anyone with that issue, so I don't know.
That comes right out of the literature, by the way. There's
Yeah.
a pamphlet about sponsorship that describes all that. This is why I always try to revert people back to the literature. There's all kinds of literature about medications. And I think it was when I don't know if you and I was talking about this with you guys, but there's some organizations that refuse to let you take your antidepressants or something.
Yes.
Was it
Yeah.
Salvation Army or something?
Yes. Salvation Army, Teen Challenge.
Teen Challenge, that's what it was. Yeah, I think you guys told me. I did not know that, but
Right.
AA as an organization has a pamphlet on medications, and their stance is they don't have an opinion. That's between you, your doctor, your sponsor. But they're
Yeah.
out of it. It's so interesting that, there's all these things coming available now. And if we just revert back to the literature, like this goes back to, I don't know what's right for you. Like even the literature of 12-step Alcoholics AA.org has all the literature for free, but even they say like we don't have an opinion.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
really something that's up to you.
Well, one of the things too is I did this, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was. Went down to LA and I decided to check out some other quote recovery meetings. And because again,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this like somebody who is like, we're going to start our own type of recovery meeting?
no,
Okay.
no, these are actual meetings that are out there. And of course, now I'm going blank, which drives me crazy.
Listen, you and I are the same age, so
Oh
I
God,
feel you.
it's
Yeah.
nuts. It's anyway. As I went to these meetings, by the way, they were pretty good. Okay, they really were pretty good. And my point here is that I was amazed at truly how much of the actual AA 12 steps were embedded in these meetings. Okay.
Nice.
And it was really nice. Now, again, one of them had something to do with Buddha, right? Again, I'm just checking them out because I wanted to know what the hell was going on out there. But in general, they were pretty damn good. And so my point here is, let's just like you said, I have my own belief on what I think, right? But there are some other organizations out there that are pretty damn good, and if that's going to help somebody stay sober in life, then go for it. Now, but I think you also have to take a look at some of these other ones and go, okay, what is the real message behind here? You said it earlier about all of a sudden that organization got cultish, and because again, you're dealing with weird personality sometimes, and you don't know where some of these places are going to go. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. I'll get those names of those two and send them to you.
There's like Recovery 2.0. There's Dharma Recovery. There's Refuge Recovery.
Refuge Recovery. That's one of them. Yep.
Yeah. There's Recovers has good meetings. There's a lot of things out. That's I gotta tell you, I'm really glad that I got sober and there was nothing else, because I think I would have chosen something else.
Yeah.
And I would have missed like the magic that is the process of the 12 steps.
Right.
Right. And so that's really what I'm trying to advocate for, is the 12 steps are a worthy endeavor. Like all these things that you think are obstacles are not a thing. Like you don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to, be living on the street. In rock bottom, that's a term that can be redefined in a way that supports you or prevents you, right? These are just terms. It's like, at the end of the day, we're talking about healing and alleviating unnecessary suffering, and we want to stop harming ourselves, and that's really what we're trying to get at. And the truth of the matter is a lot of the principles of the 12 steps are ancient wisdom. It's really nothing new. It's in a, confession is like a part of like every major organized religion. It's, service and, prayer, meditation. These are not new ideas, right? And they can be adapted in a multitude of different ways. And so my whole thing is just give it a shot. It's a magical process. Yeah. And I've noticed that every time I address the steps, I've done them, I've done them 1 through 12 many times. I've also done what they call the maintenance steps, 10, 11, and 12, the prayer, meditation, just the constant self-reflection and evaluation and trying to be of service. Like that's kind of how I maintain. Right. And those core elements can be found in a multitude of ways, but it's every time I address the steps, I change. Therefore, the next time I address the steps, I get something different out of it because I'm different. Mm-hmm. I'm different every time I start them over. Mm-hmm. And so I get something different. And so it's like, it can go on and on forever. I've been sober a long time and I still learn something new about myself. Like we're never done.
Yeah. Well, and that's probably a big misconception for sure. It's like,
oh, so you do once and you're done?
Yeah, I've hit the checkered flag. It's not that kind of thing.
What's cool about it is that there probably isn't a day go by that unconsciously I don't apply one of the 12 steps somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
honesty, integrity, surrender, acceptance. These are principles. Yeah.
Right. That's what's just so cool about it,
Arlina, if people want to check out the book, what's the easiest way to get the book? And if they want to get a hold of you?
Well, the book is on Amazon, the 12-Step Guide for Skeptics. We hit #1 in alcoholism, drug addiction, and recovery, and obviously the 12-step category. So we hit #1 in 3 different categories, which is cool. And if people want to reach out to me, I'm all about like meeting people where they're at. If after all this, you're just like, nope, I I actually work with a lot of executives, like CEOs or people that are, are pressed for time and whatever. Sober coaching is a thing, right? I have Sober Life School. People can work with me one-on-one if they kind of want to just like get right into it. I think one of the hardest things for me in the beginning was finding a sponsor. It took a long time, and some people just don't want to take a long time. And if I've said something that you resonate with and you want to work with me, you can do it through Sober Life School.
All right. Well, I'll put those links in the podcast description. Mr. Andersen.
Oh, Arlina, thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
It's so good to be with you guys. You guys just get it. And I love that about
you. Well, we love you and we love talking with you as well. So just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing amazing work. Amazing work.
Thanks for your support. I appreciate you.
You bet.
And thank you all for supporting Pains Don't Hide the Scars podcast on YouTube. Of course, we're at Pain Nonprofit. Subscribe, leave a thumb up, comment in the video. Not only will Flindt and myself see it, but Arlina will as well. And hey, please subscribe and share also on Apple Podcast and Spotify.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call PAIN, Parents and Addicts in Need, at 559-579-1551, or visit us online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Pain Nonprofit. And please subscribe to the Don't Hide the Scars podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. And if you would like to donate to PAIN, Parents and Addicts in Need, please click the link in the description to make your tax-deductible donation today and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.